Even if we could restore them, would it make a difference? Answers are coming from a surprising place, America's premier wilderness. It's a landscape that transports us back to the American West. This was the world's first national park. It remains a symbol of the untouched wild. Yet far from the crowds at Old Faithful, clues are emerging that something has thrown Yellowstone out of kilter. When hydrologist Bob Beshta arrived here in 1996, he noticed something wrong with the Lamar River. It was an early hint of a broader pattern of disturbances.
The hydrologic signature was the one that initially grabbed me, and it was that I have a stream that has overwidened. I have eroding banks along this entire reach here. I'm losing soil, which is a very precious resource in any system. Sediments being pushed up on top of soils that have been there for hundreds or thousands of years. I had a river that was in chaos, but I didn't understand why.
A rare photograph from the early 1900s of this same stretch of river shows that willow shoots once protected the banks.
The interesting thing to me about this photograph is that it shows a fully vegetated stream bank on the other side, in contrast to what we're seeing today. The vegetation is just totally gone. And so the animals and species that depend upon this vegetation, it's just not here for them.
Beshta has documented Yellowstone's changes, but he and others are trying to explain why the park is so different from the place described by early explorers. "150 years ago, large carnivores like mountain lions are more abundant. Wolves keep elk on the run. Trappers report rivers abounding in beavers. Bison, numbering millions across the western plains, roam through the park. By the 1990s, the picture has changed. Beavers are scarce in Yellowstone's northern range. The number of songbirds is reduced in some areas along with their habitat. But perhaps most perplexing of all are the missing trees. Aerial photographs taken in the park in 1954 and again in 1992 reveal a dramatic change. Fewer large aspen trees among the conifers and little new growth. The park's oldest aspens are at the end of their days. How could entire forests disappear right in the middle of a protected wilderness? That's what biologists Bill Ripple and Eric Larson are investigating.
We're really at a critical level for the overstory aspen here in Yellowstone, because unless we get some new development in another 50 years, there aren't going to be any aspen trees here in Yellowstone. I think that would be a tragedy.
Ripple and Larson had a list of suspects in the aspen's disappearance. At first, they considered climate change. But if that were the cause, they reasoned, aspens should be declining throughout the area.
Well, we looked at the aspen outside the park and in the park, and we found it cannot be global warming because outside the park there were a lot more flourishing aspen than in the park.
Then they turned to the next suspect, fire. Could the reduction of forest fires in the park be hurting the aspens? These are trees that in fact thrive after a burn. But the huge fire of 1988 ultimately produced few large trees. Ripple and Larson need another clue. So they look within the aspens themselves. They drill cores from nearly 100 trees. By counting the growth rings, one per year, they can determine a tree's age. The cores are telling a story. There are almost no middle-aged trees. Most are at least 70 years old.
And then we say, wow, this might be it right here. The aspen stopped regenerating in the 1930s and hasn't regenerated since, throughout all of the 20th century.
What could have happened in the park back then? Ripple and Larson know of one significant change. By the 1930s, Yellowstone's last wolf was dead. In the 1800s, we entered this realm which wolves had ruled as top predators for millennia. We sized them up as a threat. Between 1883 and 1917, more than 100,000 wolves were killed for bounty in Montana and Wyoming alone. By the 1970s, they were listed as endangered in the U.S. Biologist Doug Smith has studied wolves for most of his life. He sees the amazing possibility that their absence could somehow be connected to Yellowstone's missing forests and eroding riverbanks.
This animal, wolves, was a part of North American ecosystems. And a big question for biologists worldwide is what has been the effect of removing large carnivores.
An experiment that began in 1995 for a completely different purpose could help to answer this question.
8 Canadian gray wolves were locked in small metal cages, prisoners despite overwhelming nationwide.
In an intensely controversial act of wildlife management, Doug Smith and colleagues brought 31 gray wolves from Canada to Yellowstone. What grabbed the headlines was the politics of predators. But their effect on the environment would become the more enduring story. Soon after their release, the wolves are seen traveling in packs. A powerful hunting tactic for these top predators.
try and keep track of all the different packs of wolves in Yellowstone. Right now, that's 14 packs, about 150 wolves. And so keeping track of them is a difficult job. We know all the packs, we know the history of all the packs, and we know individual wolves. But as we follow them, day by day, week by week, month by month, we're learning there's a lot more to this than just wolves. We're learning that wolves may mean a lot to this ecosystem, a lot more than we ever dreamed.
The wolves' impact starts with their kills.
In a lot of ways, a wolf kill is not an ending, but a beginning. Every wolf kill becomes kind of a small epicenter of animal activity. Ravens, magpies, coyotes, bald eagles, golden eagles. If it's not the dead of winter, grizzly bears, maybe even black bears. So these kills are extremely important to the ecological community of Yellowstone.
Long after the larger scavengers have left the scene, insects pursue their share. In this way, one wolf kill serves hundreds. But Doug Smith thinks the wolves have an even greater impact. By killing elk, they may be literally reshaping the landscape.
Cow elk killed by wolves. What's interesting is this elk is lying dead in a patch of luxuriantly growing willow. These willows right around here are doing exceptionally well, and we think it's because the elk are spending less time eating them, and that's allowing these willows around here to get a good growth. This is all in the last 4 or 5 years.
It's a critical piece of evidence, a break in the case of the missing trees. Research suggests that the elimination of Yellowstone's wolves allowed the elk to browse aspens and willows brazenly. Though other factors may have played a role, it seems the disappearance of trees and streamside vegetation can be traced to the missing wolves. Now, where elk are on the run, trees and shrubs are starting to come back. And other species appear to be benefiting as well.
And when I first did the beaver survey for Yellowstone in 1996, there were no beaver colonies in this whole area. And this colony has just come in and they've settled right here. First colony in Lamar Valley probably in decades. That's just, oh, there it is, swimming. There's a beaver swimming into the lodge. There he is, right there. Oh yeah, jeez. This is a vivid example of wolf reintroduction in that this beaver lives on the willows in this area. This beaver colony is very likely here because of the reintroduction of wolves.
Yellowstone's past may be a picture of its future. Once again, willows are offering beavers the materials they need to construct their dams. In turn, beaver ponds offer extra water and a buildup of nutrients, so plants can flourish on the banks as they did more than 70 years ago.
Wolves, through elk, through the vegetation, may actually control the character of the Lamar River, and it's just a mind-boggler to me.